You hear it, you know it. It's that time of the week again. Welcome to your weekly dose of monkey business. As always, I am your host. My name is Chris. With me, as always, perennial, perpetually, indefinitely, the legend Billy.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Billy.
Hi.
And we have Tanya.
Hi.
And our producer Sherry's in the house today.
Hello.
And our very own Rosenfern and Gilden Plants.
Yay.
Did I get that right this time?
Gilden Plots.
Gilden Plots. It's Zach and Rob are in the house.
Allegedly,
Hi.
2 peas in a podcast.
Yeah, 2 peas in a podcast, yes.
That's our spin-off
That's
show.
our spin-off show. It's
We're
going to be we're going to be airing it probably in a couple of months. Probably in the new year we're going to start a spin-off show.
Yeah, that'll last an episode before the
Well,
internet.
if there's a lot of Rob's puns, then yeah. It
Yeah.
won't
No,
last very
I think
long.
that would be the draw.
Yes, Rob's puns. I don't know if he can
No.
I don't think he can keep that going for an hour straight
No.
though.
I don't know.
That would
I
be-
think he could.
We'll have to do a test run of that to see what's going
No.
on. So here we are in the 16th floor of the WFC3 studio, staring out at a blustery fall day, and we have some friends in the studio with us today. First things first, a little pieces of business. We just want to give some shout outs to our friends and family and our sponsors. As always, we getting a lot of love from Knox Craft Cocktails and Comfort Foods at the Village Gate and their sister shop, the Salinas, the greatest Mexican restaurant in the Monroe County area. Also, at this point, you will have seen all of the announcements. We are now on Patreon. www.patreon.com/FC3ROC. If you like us, if you want to support us, if you want to see us grow, please feel free to stop by, take a look at what we've put together, and consider giving us a donation or some sort of a subscription to keep making the monkey business happen. And if you're interested in sponsoring Flower City Comic-Con or advertising in our program, you can reach out to us through sponsorships at fc3roc.com. So that's the business. Then we're going to be moving on from there. We've gotten this ship to the point where, you know, we've built it. We've got people doing jobs and having a great time and building things and making things happen. Now we just need fuel in the tank, and that's going to be your love and support and backing. And so if you love us, help us out. Moving on. In the studio today with us on our interview series is none other than Chris Pallace. I got a great write-up here. Chris Pallace is getting a little round of applause.
Thank you.
He's a dad, a husband, a writer, game designer, professional artist, amateur cook, and intermediate juggler. His own father once observed, there's the easy way, the hard way, and the Chris way. I think that's synonymous with the name Chris because it feels very familiar.
That's a stinking little
Yeah, the Chris way
From the
intends
Chris
to
in
be
the corner.
easier than the easy way, but is almost always harder than the hard way. While admitting that this is true, Chris would like to point out it's the journey that he enjoys. Chris co-owns Bent Castle Workshops and produces top-notch games and playing cards, and is currently writing and illustrating Joey and Johnny the Ninjas for HarperCollins. He also has a design company and creates whimsical fairy doors, of which Tanya owns a TARDIS door.
I do.
And that's like a mandatory piece for any Doctor Who fans collection. So in the studio, Chris Pallace. Hi, Chris. Thanks
Hi.
for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Awesome sauce.
Oddly enough, after this, I have to go make more TARDIS doors.
Okay, so my daughter and I, we want one of your Sherlock doors, but there's a mistake in it.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
The knocker is supposed to be askew.
Sometimes
It's a symmetry thing.
it's the spirit of the idea than the literal interpretation, because if we left it askew, it would bug everybody who wasn't you.
That's it, see? And it's just signifying that particular time Mycroft is visiting.
He's visiting, yes.
That's all you need to know at
Yep.
this point. Chris, as I was saying, you know, when we were doing the pre-show stuff, I always love these interviews. They give me a chance to kind of get into the author, the blogger, the writer, the creator's heads. I've kind of treated these interviews as a chance to have an origin story moment, like, you know, which is phenomenal for us comic book geeks. So my first question is how did this all start for you? Where did you realize that this was that you had that connection to the art, to the creation?
My earliest memories are drawing trucks with too many wheels.
Okay.
I used to just draw trucks, and I didn't stop drawing wheels until I hit the back of the truck.
There you go.
And from there, I was always drawing any chance I got. I've always enjoyed it. By the time I was 8, I was convinced I was going to be an artist when I grew up.
And that's a good. Now, how old is your son who's behind you?
He is 8.
You are 8, so this is right about the moment where lightning's going to strike, buddy. Don't be scared; it's all good. Whenever the idea of creation enters your head, roll with it, with as many wheels as possible.
I'd like to point out that I didn't know I'd be making fairy doors when I was 8.
Okay. How did that come about?
That's a weirder story, but it's kind of makes sense. My wife was getting into doing clay work just before we got pregnant. And I say we, like, it was my job.
Yeah, you did have a hand in it. Well, maybe not a hand, but
and then we
Child in the studio.
That's as far as I go.
Exploring pottery after she got pregnant. She just didn't have the time. It wasn't a great time to be using a kick wheel, and she had been making these tiny little fairy houses. After our son was born, we had a friend who was at the Sterling Renaissance Fair, and he was going to quasi-retire, and he wanted to see if we wanted to take over his booth for a year or two.
Okay.
And with literally a month and a half before the fair started, she looked at me and said, "Husband, you're creative. Make something that we could sell at the Ren Fair."
Oh, good.
I grew up here, and I think our now, at that point in time, 2-year-old son would also have a fun time growing up here. And so I got together with my partner, Kevin, and we kind of said, well, what can we do? And I said, I'm not going to make a whole house, but if I take her idea of the fairy homes and I just build a door, whatever you put the door on becomes the fairy home.
Nice.
Be it your wall or a tree outside or the side of your car, whatever you put it on.
That is phenomenal. I love that.
And the weird thing was, I was working on making fairy doors out of wood. That didn't really work out, even though you'd think they should be made out of wood because they weren't very weatherproof. At the same time, completely unrelated, Kevin was working on an experiment where he was just cutting plastic with a bandsaw, and he didn't have a goal, but he found out that when he cut it, it made the plastic look like wood. Because he was cutting on a bandsaw, it left a toothy grain on it, like if you made a veneer.
All right, so it had texture.
And so he's like, I got this interesting plastic that's made out that looks like wood, and I'm like, I need something that can survive in the elements. And we kind of took the research he was doing and the idea I had, which wasn't even my idea because it was inspired by my wife's idea, and we all kind of came together and started producing fairy doors.
Planetary alignment moments. I love those. Those are like my favorite things. That's this podcast, for instance, is a planetary alignment with all the people we've got here.
So yeah, this will be our 8th year at the Ren Fair.
That's
and
phenomenal.
At this point in time, fairy doors is 95% of what I do.
Wow. Okay. So that's really kind of become your thing.
It did.
That's amazing. And then you and I met at the Ren Fair.
Yes.
Way back when in the day.
Yeah.
I haven't been in Sterling on a regular basis in a very long time, but I do remember.
I always wondered because I know you from Ren Fair too, long time. Karen Becker used to make little fairy doors and hide them around the fair.
Yes.
And I always wondered if that was any part of your.
The funny thing is, she made them, and then the first year that she put them out, I was sitting around and I broke out some magic markers and I drew a bunch of paper fairies and cut them out. And then before she got there, I taped all of my paper fairies behind her little fairy doors. So we knew Karen for
Ever.
forever.
I never saw the fairies inside.
That's awesome.
Well, they were paper, so it took exactly one rainfall or one tug of a child's hand.
And that was that.
Well, I was up the hill.
But
And now we're over the hill.
That's a whole different podcast.
That is definitely floating around back there. We still see Ed at the fair, and we actually get together for what we call Gypsy Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And so we see Ed all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. See, those are the things that make everything unique.
Karen was the one who actually introduced me to Chris.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was our storyteller.
Yes.
We miss her very much.
Very much.
Think about her often. So tell me about Bent Castle Workshops.
That was shortly. Funny thing, that's also a Ren Fair connection.
Okay.
The person whose space at the Ren Fair I eventually wound up taking over. His name was Ben Crenshaw, and he was a jeweler and a rune reader. He was selling in the front. I was helping out with Tina, who was reading tarot at the time. And we kind of just became friends, and we both realized that we had this graphic design illustration background, and we both loved card games. And we kind of started talking. We'd only see each other from June until August. And then, thankfully for the internet, we just continued to communicate via email.
Right.
And eventually said, you know what, we could put our talents together and make something. So in 2004, I took a risk and kind of quit my day job and sat down to start making our first card game. And we released it in 2005, and it was called Scallywags.
Okay.
Good game.
The pirate one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I have played it.
Cutthroat cutthroat adult pirate game. And by adult, I don't mean porn. I just mean not for kids. It's what we call a tiers game. Sometimes if you got to know who you're playing with because they can be tiers.
Not tears as in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tears.
But the tears running down your face.
Tears running down your face.
It's just like every gaming session. There could be potentially tears.
We're still lifelong D&D players, and so we understand what tears at the table means. So
yeah, we still have we actually know people that we like flat out warn. It's like, okay, not a game for you. Let's play Numbers League. Numbers League, we're all kind of working together.
Now, did Numbers League come after Scallywags? Was there any other intermediary steps?
Numbers League was basically the next thing we jumped onto after Scallywags, and we kind of did that in 2000. It was released in 2005, Scallywags, and then we did some promotion and design work for a while, and we kind of started figuring out, oh no, we can make things, but now how do we support things? How do we make a business out of it?
Right.
And then we started to work on Numbers League probably in 2006. It was released in early 2007.
Right. I remember when it unveiled, because I immediately got a set for my kids, and they wore out the first box, and we had to get another one. I know that's hard for you to hear. Yeah, and then we have the expansion.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit more, because I know what it is, but tell our listeners a little bit more about what Numbers League is all about.
Numbers League is a card game, and the funny thing is we built Numbers League by accident when we were building Scallywags. Because behind any game that you play, there's like a mathematical basis of keeping the game fair, keeping the game regulated, unless it's a storytelling game. And so we were kind of constantly saying, how do we balance out Scallywags? How do we do this? How do we do that? Oh, this chance of this probability, that chance of that probability. Oh, you're going to do this. And we just do game test after game test. And for us, the designers of the game, we didn't have fancy pictures or little stories on the cards. We just had like numbers so that we could just kind of go, okay, this would work. And it said captain on it, but it was really just a series of numbers.
To see how the patterns would work.
Yeah. And then as we were doing that, we were saying, you know what? Behind this complicated pirate game, there's actually kind of a fun and straightforward numbers game, and maybe if we can just kind of play to that instead of trying to hide it, we have a whole second game here. And I grew up loving math. I loved math and art. Those were my two things. I applied when I went to college. I applied both for illustration and for physics at the same time.
You mentioned that in your TED Talk. Yeah. I believe. And that's a topic we'll get to in a little bit, because I wanted to ask you about that.
And
we've all watched it now.
Was a way to come back to that.
Okay.
We kind of made a list when we got together, me and Ben, of things we wanted to do. And we're like, monsters, zombies, superheroes, pirates. And we kind of started going through the list. And I'm like going, I feel like numbers could tie into superheroes. When I was a kid and I used to read comic books, I still do. But my thing that I obsessed over was they made something called the Marvel Universe Handbook.
Okay.
And in it, they would give these things, which are ridiculous now as an adult, but they'd explain like Cyclops' optic blasts have the equivalent power of 12 pounds of dynamite per square inch. I'm like going, yes, that makes sense, yes. And I'm like, no, it doesn't.
No. Wait, what?
But I was like, yes, numbers, math, I now know. I can compare that to Polaris. Oh, Cyclops is more powerful than Polaris because of 12 pounds of dynamite per square inch.
Billy, are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. I do know that book, and I would think similar. I'd try to compare and contrast the different heroes and villains.
I didn't even realize I was on the edge of being OCD on that level. Now, years
I still
later,
do it.
Because I would go like, okay, it said Ben Grimm can lift 85 tons, She-Hulk can lift 75 tons, but Colossus can lift 70. But it says that he's still expanding with his strength because he's a young man.
Oh, I
and
see.
He might become stronger when he's older. And I would like put all those facts and figures in my heads, and someone would say, well, what would happen if Ben would do this? And I'd be like, well, quite frankly.
I can answer that question.
And then have an intelligent conversation about the future of people who do not exist. It's awesome. That's what it's all about.
And here, I'm going to drag myself back to numbers. Like I tangent a lot.
Oh, you fit in really well with us then.
We don't whatsoever.
You can be a regular on this show just for that reason only.
I'm back to the concept of I grew up loving math. So Numbers League was a way for me and Ben to kind of create a game that was still focused on fun, focused on superheroes in this case, but while you play, you're also teaching yourself foundation math.
Right.
And by saying I love math, I'm not like, redefining the universe. I'm not doing Einsteinian math. I just enjoy the simple basics of it, and I've always had a good time with it. And I think everyone should be. I remember everybody didn't like math when I was a kid, and it was like it's so important for everything you do all the time. And if you can just get past hating it and just learn to like it on some level, it'll make so many aspects of your life 1,000 times easier.
I think I need to invite him into
Yeah.
my classroom.
No, seriously. My mother
We'll
is.
come and play Numbers League. I do
I
that with
teach
classrooms.
math.
My mother's a retired school teacher. She taught in the city school district for 37 years.
Okay.
And so she came over one day and she saw the kids playing Numbers League. And so she asked them to explain it to her, and they did. And she looked at me. She goes, "Wow, this game is the cure for the Common Core." and she was
There needs to be a lot of cures for the
and
Common
she was
Core.
really
Good
impressed with it.
catchphrase.
And so and then she sat down. She had my son, who at the time I think was like 4 or 5 when he 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that area. And he's the younger of the two. And he was trying to teach his grandmother in the way that a 5-year-old would teach somebody anything. And she's like, "Oh, this is," and she loved the colors and the pictures and everything. And so yeah, it was. When you have an educator of that stature tell this is the good stuff, then I was like, I know my friend here did something really, really well, and so we were all about
I gave
supporting
birth
that.
to a person who loves numbers, she's always been into math. She's always loved it.
Right now, she's really into her phone.
Really into her phone at the
Teenagers.
moment. But she's in her second year of college. She was going for nursing. She hated it. She just switched majors. She's going to be an accountant now because she's going back to
Talk
the math.
about embracing numbers. That's
And
amazing.
I'll have you do
tying
my
it back to
taxes.
this building,
Yes.
we once did a fiberglass sculpture of a bat horse, Batman, except he was a horse.
Okay.
That sat in the the plaza of this building, and we did that for Mengel, Mesker, and Barr, who are accountants.
Yeah.
And when we had our conversation with them, they literally said, "What we do is kind of boring. Don't make us a boring horse.
Okay.
Anything's on the table." And we're like, "How about Batman, but he's a horse?" And they're like, "We're in."
And those are the horses that were for
Horses on parade.
Horses
The
on
Horses on
Parade,
Parade.
that was back in 1999. That's when Kevin and I, the guy I make the fairy doors with, first started working together.
Okay.
We knew each other in college, but that's when we first started, a business
Being a
venture
team.
together. Yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Those horses are all over the place.
And the fairy doors, is that the blue toucan?
Yes.
All right,
And
so-
that is Kevin and I. We are partnership making. Well, technically, we are a design firm, but our design, 95% of it at this point in time is making fairy doors.
Gotcha. What are some of the other projects?
We've done,
What's the other 5%?
Right now we actually have somebody's horse.
Okay.
That they bought a raw horse and they want us to do our own sculpture of it. They're a metal duct company, and they want us to kind of make this cool. Well, they left it up to us, but they want us to somehow incorporate the product. So we're going to make a cool steampunky horse.
Cool.
But
was gonna
that is a
say
slow
steampunk
burn on their end. We've had that horse for a while, so it's like a thing that we're going to do. Wintertime's a good time for that, so maybe coming up soon.
So the horses on parade, they're still making those?
No, this is just as an interest to how slow of a burn it is. This woman bought the horse in 1999.
Oh, wow.
Thought, we're going to have somebody do it in-house. That didn't quite work out, but
Okay.
she kept it in the back of her mind. One day she found us at one of our studios when we were in Bay Plaza.
Okay.
And they came over, and she's like, "Oh, my God, do you guys do the horses?" We said, "We did." And she goes, "I have a horse." And next thing we knew, she was dropping off a horse with us. So
That's amazing.
Yeah, so she had held on to it for 10 years.
That
Yeah.
is amazing.
More than that.
All right, so that's www.bluetoucanstudios.com. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you can find the Blue Toucan group, and the Fairy Doors is # #fairy doors. Hashtag fairy doors.
No, it's just bluetoucanstudios.com.
Okay. All right,
That's
so just looking at the whole link.
an old Facebook link.
Oh, okay, okay.
I don't really do Facebook. I do Instagram.
Oh, do you now?
Yeah, so we're The Fairy Door on Instagram.
The Fairy Door on Instagram. All right, so that's...
But we have a Facebook page, and it's horribly out of date. And I've just figured out how to link my Instagram to my Facebook account, and things will be better.
Okay. See, and then, so now you can find him on Facebook as well as Instagram. And you'll see funds a-popping at this point. Yeah, it's like we didn't realize we have like 4 Facebooks for FC3. There's like the main page, and then now the podcast is getting its own. The corporation has its own. It's like, wait, what?
It sneaks
The
up
staff, the
does.
volunteers.
on you. And it's one of those things like we established it, and then it was that I don't really know how to do this. So I just kept on doing what I was doing, and then at some point in time, someone would contact me and say, "This link is broken." I'm like, "What link? What link where?"
How do I break the internet?
Yeah, by folding it in on itself. So you've got bentcastle.com, bluetoucanstudios.com. Is there like a website that kind of, it's like the one ring, it ties it all together so you can find all these
Toucan
things?
Studios.
Blue Toucan?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's links off of that.
Okay. And so what other projects are you working on right now?
What we're talking about doing some murals for one of the city's historic buildings, actually.
Really?
It's over near the South Wedge. There is a child care center, and we're going to be theoretically doing their whole theme is insect-based, like there's the ladybugs and the mantises and the dragonflies and stuff like that. So we're going to come in and do a bunch of child-friendly insect illustrations for them.
Oh, that's going to be cool.
But our goal is to actually make them slightly dimensional because that's kind of our thing now.
Okay.
And to help with that, we just it's being shipped to us right now, but we have our first laser cutter. We're actually kind of upgrading what we can do this year. And our wintertime is going to be our time of exploration to figure out how to use all these new machines that we've purchased.
New toys to play with.
We got our first 3D printer, our first laser cutter, and we have had a CNC machine for a while. We just haven't had the space to use it.
What is that?
Yeah, I was going to say, what's a CNC machine?
It is a robot-controlled router.
Okay.
So basically, put a router on an XYZ grid, and it slides back and forth, and it can cut down, but it can also move the router head up and down, so you can get relief carvings out of things.
Oh, that's cool.
So a lot of if you've ever seen large, fancy signs that are dimensional but not sculptural, not like a large curving shape, but like layers of shapes on top of layers of shapes. That was probably done by a CNC machine.
Very, very cool. Go ahead, Billy.
Turn my microphone back on. Strangely enough, I've been working at radio station for the last 10 years or so, but before that I spent 3 or 4 years working on a laser cutting machine. So maybe I'll know what to do. Maybe I don't know how to use the thing anymore.
I will contact
but
you guys because we literally we'll buy it, and now that we've invested money in it, that's encouragement to learn how to use it.
I might know how to do something with it. I don't know yet, but just
It'd be worth exploring just for the fun of it.
I
was that
did
Chris?
for a while.
I did computer-aided router and lathe in high school,
Oh, okay.
and a little bit of robotics.
That was
our
robotics.
other Chris, that was associate producer Chris, who was tripping over his goatee today.
Well, it's funny when we make our fairy doors. They're these tiny little doors. They're 9 inches tall or smaller, and yet we have a studio that's about 1,800 square, and half of it is dedicated to these giant woodworking machines.
Oh, wow.
And so we have all of these super manly machines to build, fairy doors.
They're itty bitty teeny,
they're so
cute.
Not that tiny. I mean, they're good. They're
Not
hand span.
tiny, but
They're about 9 to 10 inches tall.
Yeah, 9-10 inches.
Do you
tall.
have any fairy doors that look like Superman's Fortress? A solitude door
that's
with
a good one.
with the key.
I totally could do that.
Yeah, he could. You
that's
can
kinda like-
customize and make your own fairy door.
I
and
might
send
want
him
one of those.
But the great thing is I could do it. Have like
want
the
that one.
crystalline frame around it, and then the big. You're talking about like the old DC style
Yeah,
giant
with
golden
the
doors with
the
a
gold
huge
door
goofy
with
key.
Yeah, with the big key.
And
that
we'd have to make a key that could sit on the ground next to it.
that was supposed to be like an airplane pointer or
Yeah.
something. Yes.
Yeah, I love that was a very clever. Actually, that's some of the things that I love about old school comics is the ideas that are ridiculous, but they're so charming. Like he's Superman, so he builds a giant door with a giant lock in it, and the key just sits on the snow next to the door because he's Superman.
Right.
Who else is going to be able to pick up this door and open it? But the fact that you have to have that moment where he flies down, picks it up, sticks it in the thing, twists it with his super strength, then pulls it back out, opens up the door. It's like, oh, thank God he's not in a hurry.
And why didn't he just fly through the keyhole?
I know.
The simple physics of comic books. That's all.
But yeah, doing a crystalline frame structure and then the big golden door in the middle with all the rivets, like the old style rivets, like it was a battleship.
This is a door that can take a hit from a superhero. That's amazing.
Don't mind me over here. I'm
Yeah,
shopping.
you're
for-
scrolling away. It's making me a little dizzy, I gotta
Sorry.
tell you.
Stop watching it.
No.
I'm looking at fairy doors. I found one I want.
Why don't you?
Come on over.
So they could actually.
We don't have enough Chris's in the studio right now. We're at 3. I think we need another.
Should we change our name to Chris?
Yeah, you're
Chris.
you're Chris. You're Christopher Rob and Christopher Robin. And no, that's Christopher Robin. That's Christopher Zakin.
Christopher
Oh, thank you.
Walken.
Yeah, I'm Christopher Walk-In because I'll walk in the studio and
There
say
you go.
hi,
Yeah.
Christopher.
Wow, we've really digressed.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
that's
these
what we
things
do.
happen.
That's what we're at. What we're at our best.
I'm
is-
working. This is like my thing now. I'm collecting Chris's.
I'm so sorry, Sherry.
Of all the collections you could have in your life, really, that one's kind of sad.
It's still not as bad. I still remember to this day. 7th grade social studies, because they don't call it for history for some reason.
Yeah.
And it was 7 Chris's in a 21 kid room.
Wow.
God.
And so everybody was their first name and their last initial, and I hated it because I was crispy.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a year at Red Fair that I remember. It seemed like every other guy's name was Chris. And the big joke that I had was, if you don't know a guy's name, just yell, "Hey, Chris," and you had a really good chance of
There's
being
someone
correct.
turn around.
So we turn-
And a friend of mine, my friend Tyson, had come and he'd brought his roommate who I'd never met before, and I was telling this guy my theory about just yell, "Hey, Chris," and I said,
His
by
name
the
was
way,
Chris?
I said, "Oh, by the way, hi, I'm Sherry," and he said, "Hi, I'm Chris." I said, "Oh, no." He's like, "No, really, it's Chris."
and it's one of those things where, like, of course, they say, like, John and Mohammed, most popular names in the universe, but Chris is also Chrissy, Christine, Crystal, Kristen, on and on and on and on and on. There's so many people whose names shorten down to Chris. I wonder if it's in contrast, if it's a contender for the most popular name.
I used to think I was just so unique, and then I was told otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm
My
not.
first year in college, my first semester in college, I lived with a Christine and a Kristen. So it was Chris,
And Chrissy.
Well,
Yeah, okay.
I made a cosmic faux pas because you never tell the universe what you won't do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a bad idea. So I was like, I'm a Chris. I'll never date a Christine. We won't be Chris and Chris.
And your wife's name is?
Is Tina.
Okay,
but, she's
but it's
a
short for-
Justine. But
Okay.
together we're still Christine.
Okay. Christy.
So
That's it.
we're still Christina. So.
See that, but that was something
That's
that could
cute.
possibly happen. Is Christine's a very popular name? My dad has a cousin whose name is Jan. He married a woman named Janice. What are the odds of that?
Very slim.
See, this is what this podcast is famous for, Chris. We are right
Side
down
quests and
Broadway. I'm telling you,
digressions.
we're heading down the point. Everything is going great, and then all of a sudden there's Saks Fifth Avenue, and oh look, there's something else.
Hey, look, a horse.
Hey, look, a horse.
Oh, look, a chicken.
Oh, look, it's a cloud.
Is that a cloud in the sky?
It's not a cloud.
He's not a cloud. All right, so you've got all this great stuff in your studio. Where is your studio, by the way?
We are 510 State Street. It's a collective of artists. We are
Made on State.
on State. Yeah.
And you know how I know that building? I'm the code enforcement officer for that area.
Oh, really?
And so I was the inspector who made sure that everything was all in order when that building was finished.
So it's all in order, right?
It was
Okay.
for the most part. Yeah, there's a couple
He didn't let
small
anything
projects.
slide.
Yeah, there's a couple of small projects he's working
Like,
on.
it's not my building, so I want it to be in order. Yeah.
Well, the guy who runs it, Joe, he's really good. He's good people. So if you ever have an issue, just let him know.
And the owner, Craig Webster, has been
Yes.
great to us.
Yeah, I've met
The
Craig on
this
several
is actually-
occasions.
we just had our 1-year anniversary.
Okay. That's amazing. That I didn't even, I probably saw you there, but
Didn't make
I
the
was
connection.
walking through the building so quickly that.
Well, actually, we came in. The building had a cold open.
Yeah.
In that's a terrible word.
Yes, it is. It very much is.
Soft open is just a horrible phrase.
Hey,
And like in August,
I'm
a bunch of
sorry.
people started moving in, and then we came in because summer's our busiest time. We couldn't move in during the summer, and we came in October, and then our official opening was November, and the rest of the building kind of went like, yeah, let's do it then. So that's what we claim as our 1 year. But because we. People have been in the building back in August. If you were there in August and before, or June and before, you wouldn't have seen me because I would have been busy making ferry doors somewhere else.
Right. Okay. And because I remember the origami and the metal workers, and there's just a lot going on in that building. It's
Yeah,
great. It used to be an industrial building. I can't remember exactly. It was a meatpacking plant, if I'm not mistaken.
It might have been that at one point in time. It was definitely a welding supply
Yes,
company.
there was that too.
Because there's those words are painted on the walls, and it used to be a part of it. I think it was 2 or 3 buildings that grew into each other, and it was a boat repair because the back loading dock is a place that they used to roll boats in to do repair work inside.
Yep, I remember that.
And we
then they've
chose
converted
that
it
back.
into almost like an artist conclave at this
It
point.
really
There's a lot of
is.
artists and crafters and
It's got it's got Stephanie, who's Fired Figments. She does fantasy style pottery. There's us who do our fairy doors. There's we're kind of co-renting space to a woodworker because we have a bunch of woodworking tools and
Right.
he's come in. There's a professional framer, Allison Nichols, with creative design. She does amazing stuff.
I met her.
Aragami, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, she was one of the first people in.
Okay.
And there's a art printer there now. There's a like a publicity team that does like videos for websites and things like that. There's a printer, a silk screener, tons of stuff. There's a grad student who's doing her time there just as like an artist studio where she's doing her like oil painting grad work.
Yes.
I mean, it's just.
I know exactly where that is too. I remember that person.
And there's
Yeah.
also Jesse, who does. Have you ever seen a circus performance where someone does a spinning performance art with a ring, like a giant metal
Yes.
ring? He makes them.
He makes the rings.
Yes, he makes the rings.
Phenomenal.
So
I wanted to try that.
Yeah,
Phenomenal.
and he sometimes gets those guys who buy the rings from him to come in and do demonstrations for us. So, well, for people in general, but they're just really cool to see.
So that's Made on State right
Made on
here in
State.
Rochester, New York. So when people say, "Hey, the city's really boring," just add that to your long list of reasons of how they're wrong, basically, because there's always these little pockets.
Fascinating.
It's amazing.
And we're right down in the High Falls area, too. We're just State and Smith, right
Yeah.
where State turns into Lake.
Right, and you've got Vincent along your border, which is what J Street kind of turns into Vincent as it arcs around behind your building.
Yes.
towards Lyle. So it's there's a triangle, and it's right there. And ignore the monuments, the headstone production facility.
Which is kind of cool, too.
It is, but it's morose, but
Yeah.
still, and it's all right there. There's a ton of little pockets in that building. It's amazing. I've enjoyed being in that building whenever I've had a chance. And the Gamers Nostalgia is in that building as well.
Yes, although I think they have
think
just moved out.
They did
They're
move out?
moving. Craig Webster has multiple buildings.
Oh yes, he does,
and,
especially in that concentrated in that
And
neighborhood.
I think they moved them to one of the other facilities, but they
Okay.
were there when we first moved in, and they just moved out because I know this because Allie moved from her smaller space over to where the gamers used to be.
Cool deal. Okay, right up front.
Yeah.
So you can access hers right from State Street itself, right there in the parking area. Very cool. So now you've got all this great stuff, and you've got this great building and this great enclave of creative talent all around you. Where is it going? Where are you taking this next? What's the next big
Honestly,
project?
for the near future, I'm continuing to explore with the fairy doors. I just love doing sculpture. One of the things that I think a lot of artists, hopefully a lot of artists agree with me on this one. I think the raw design aspect is some of the most fun that I have when I'm creating anything. Like my sketchbooks might not be anything that I can sell, but it's some of the most fun I have making the artwork that I make.
Okay.
And because the fairy doors are generally small projects with an end goal of like producing something that once we make it, it's like, there it is. There's my green man. There's my tree. There's my hobbit door. There's my whatever. And it's almost like sketching in three-dimensional sculpture.
Okay.
So it's that I have an idea for a door, and then we make it, and then we see how it comes out, and then we move on and we make another one. So like it's that constant, 8 years later, it's this constant kind of discovery of like, oh, what else can I do? What else can I do? Because certainly some things become like second nature, and then you find yourself drifting away from those and looking for something new and exciting to do that you haven't tried before.
And you have the tools to kind of make those explorations happen now.
And because it's making money for us, we have the money to buy the tools to start exploring in new areas.
New different directions.
Whereas like when I'm sitting home sketching, when I was doing card games, we're doing fine for cash, but also there was no reason to go buy a CNC machine. It was like I got my computer, and then, what did the money go to? The money went toward buying
Paper.
a tablet, a monitor that you could draw on directly. That helped, get more creative and make it more like sketching and expand my speed and what I could produce. But with this, it's like, okay, we're making these doors. And then we met a guy who was a Kodak employee for many years, and he's retired now. And he walked into our studio one day, and he said, these are great. I know all about casting. I could make you make these better and faster, like 10 times faster. And we did what you do when a guy does this. You go, okay. And then you go, we will never see you again. And I am so happy to say we were so horribly wrong.
Great.
Like literally, he came back and taught us how to do casting. And suddenly we're like, oh, we never even thought of becoming a resin caster where we make our own molds and we do our own pours, and yet now that is half of what I do when I make fairy doors. Is I make an original and I can make it so complex because I know I'm going to go make a mold off of it, and then make multiple copies off of that mold. But I just do it all in house.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that is fantastic.
Awesome. It's just
that
fun
is fantastic.
stuff, and it's completely because once again, connections through connections through connections. This guy, Bob Harmony, was helping a lady who was working with Allie, who was doing a framing piece for them. And he said, what's going on back here? Because he's just interested in artists. And at the time, we were sharing a space with Allison. And then he's like, oh, this is fascinating. I want to be part of this. Let me show you how I can help you.
That's it.
And unlike, you bump into lots of people who are like, yeah. No, he was a put the nose to the grindstone kind of guy. And in a very short period of time, we were completely changing what we did for incorporating this new facet to it.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I've learned in this journey that we've been on with Flower City Comic Con and now the podcast and everything else that's kind of coming to fruition because of it is that networking is the key. Stronger together, as some phrases have gone. And finding these people that suddenly can add new insight or bring it in a different direction. And so I understand just how valuable that can be. And that's awesome.
And by the way, I have to thank you for last year, the Flower City. My wife, we are huge Babylon 5 fans.
Okay.
But my wife particularly is a huge Scarecrow and Mrs. King fan.
Oh, so
the
we
fact
killed
that you
two birds
had
with one
Bruce
stone.
Boxleitner there was like, oh. So she actually, we've never actually gotten the signed autographs before, but she's like, no, have to. And and she got him to say, he wrote on it, Amanda, Delenn must never know. Which, if you know your shows, I guess, you got to know your shows.
That's phenomenal.
Yes,
that's good stuff right there. And now, you're big on the convention circuit. You go to
we do like 30, 32 shows a year now. Yeah.
You haven't been with us directly yet.
After this podcast is aired.
Yes.
But we basically do shows all the way up until like the week before Christmas.
Okay.
Then we have about 3 months off because no one wants to buy anything from the end of December to the beginning of April.
For some strange reason.
And then we're right back into it. And during the summer, between June and September, there's theoretically only like 14 weekends. And yet we do, I think, 20 shows over the course of those 14 weekends.
Well, yeah, remember you and I talking about the logistics of it, how you're able to kind of split the resources and make sure you can be in two places at once and whatnot.
Thank goodness for having a partner.
That's it.
Because I see that the weekend of the 17th through the 19th, you're both at the museum and Rochester Museum and Science Center and the Strong Museum of Play. You've got two shows that same weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And during the summer, it just gets like that, but times two.
And that's where having a good team comes into play. Do you want to brush on Joey and Johnny a little bit?
Sure.
Talk about Joey and Johnny?
I guess 5 years ago, Kevin and I started writing. We were just exploring ideas for other things that we could do. And one of them was trying out writing for books, and it was children's books. Kevin had written a children's book previously, like right when he got out of college kind of thing. And I had been doing the gaming right when I got out of college. So we kind of had the games aren't aimed at kids, but they're child friendly. The artwork was certainly child friendly in the thing. We're kind of talking about what we could do, and from this came the idea of this Joey and Johnny. It was how you create things when you're a little kid. Kevin actually created these characters when he was like a little kid.
Okay.
And then we basically took that as a starting point and expanded outward from there, where, what we wound up with was very different from, obviously, an idea he had when he was 9. And we wound up getting a publisher, and we got an agent and a publisher, and we made a couple of books. They're funny, they're adventure, they're novels, actually. They're like, 50, 60,000 words. So they're not like for, a non-reader. But they're also heavily illustrated, kind of focusing on kind of a wacky world where kind of anything that you'd believe could happen when you were 9 all does happen. There's superheroes, there's monsters, there's ninjas, there's robots, there's rival ninja gangs that try and stop them.
I got the tenor of what the books must be like from the review that was written by you and Kevin. I'm gonna just kind of Dutch this real quick a little bit. Sherry put it in front of me, and I got a kick out of reading just the review alone. I'm looking right. Oh, it was reviewed by Benjamin Bosch. Oh, okay. So
that one might not have been. Yeah, we didn't try and review.
You didn't rate it. Okay.
We wrote the back copy on the back of the book, but we didn't write the reviews.
Don't claim to be the brightest person in the world.
That's why he has me.
That's why I have Sherry on board and Tanya right next door.
My book is fabulous, says me.
It's awesome.
So anyway, Benjamin Bosch on May 12th of 2015 wrote the following. If you're reading this review, it's because you're like most kids and adults, if we're being honest, and you have a secret desire to be a ninja.
Aren't we all?
You've already mastered the art of sneaking around your home, grocery store, or school without being seen. You wear black all the time, not just because it's in fashion, but because you can conceal yourself in the shadows at a moment's notice. You have ceased using your real name a long time ago and instead revert to yourself by your ninja name like Master Lotus or Dragon King or Swinging Blade. In fact, some of you may even be full-fledged ninjas and want to make sure that Joey and Johnny, the ninjas get mooned, accurately represents the ninja lifestyle without giving away any trade secrets. I read that. I'm like, I got to read this book now.
Yep.
This
I know. We own this book.
That's all you need.
That's it.
We own this book.
Well, thank you very much.
You do? Okay.
Yes, we do.
And so it's just the review captures the
And that's the first time I heard the review, so I'm very pleased to hear that.
There you go. Okay, see, and it goes on. It's very, very complimentary. So this is definitely a book I'm interested.
The first book, by the way, is I know they released it in audio form as well.
Oh, yeah?
You can get it on Audible. I bought it. I bought my own book on Audible. So
Now, did you read it, or just somebody helped? Do you have a voice actor?
We offered to, and they went, "No, thank you. We'll get a professional."
There's shrink right in the heart.
No, that was good, honestly, because I actually read. There were a couple bits where they contacted us and said, do you have thoughts of character pronunciation? There's a couple bits, like there's some. In the first book, there's some old style. When you used to read comic books, there'd be the things telling you how you to become like a kick butt karate master and learn the death punch and this and that and the other thing. And I loved those, and I believed in them. And they were always for a pamphlet that was like 8 pages long. Like, that's all you need. So 8 pages in practice.
Can teach you to kill a man.
And so
with your finger.
And the whole point in the first book is there's a group called the Red Moon, who's a rival gang, and they are the Walmart of ninjas. No offense to Walmart, but they're not known for their ninjas. And
there's a sentence I never thought I would ever hear.
And everything they do is based on these silly, goofy comic book, like become a super badass without trying kind of thing. And that's from that. There's a certain tone that I wanted when I had to read those. So they actually said like, "Hey, what do you want to do for this?" And so I read it like a 1920s kind of like newspaper journalist, just bolting it out, and it was fun because I got to record that on my iPhone, nothing professional setup, and then send it over to the voice actor as like kind of like this, and then I also got to do voices for different characters, like he kind of sounds like this, or back and forth with that sort of thing. But I tell you, after 20 minutes of recording and messing up one little word and then going back and having to re-record, et cetera, I was like, ooh, I am so glad that they went with a professional instead of us, because it was
it's a different insight. It's not just reading like I just did.
Like I'll do two pages a day, and it'd be like the rest of my life trying to get this thing recorded.
Yeah. Okay. And there were two
books. Yeah.
2 books?
And maybe when there's time, there will be, more writing in the future. I enjoyed writing.
Okay.
But just for all you aspiring writers, it's not all J.K. Rowling.
No.
There's a lot of work and not a ton of pay. And and it's hard.
It
is.
It's
super hard.
I've been working on the same book for 12 years now, and I think I've gotten 3 chapters written.
There you go.
I had Dr. Seuss was that hard to read.
Well, stop. No, I'm writing, Goober. Rob. I don't hear from you for like a half an hour, and then you pipe up with that. It's like, okay, thanks.
And I missed
but
it.
like anything, ideas inspire other ideas.
Okay, absolutely. And that's always the key, is to keep that evolution moving. I want to wrap up with, we all watched your TED Talk. How did that come about? How did you get an opportunity to get involved with that?
Through the connection was made through Larry at Origami.
Okay.
He was doing a TED Talk, and they were kind of going to him like, what other creative people do you know? And Larry and I knew each other, and he's like, well, why don't you give this guy a call? He does this superhero game, and he's not afraid of speaking in front of people. So,
there you go.
And so I kind of came in. They said, well, this is what we're doing. How do you think what you do is relevant to that? And I kind of gave a pitch, and they're like, yeah. The whole concept of that first spark.
Right.
That first spark of of what gets you an idea that winds up leading somewhere. Not being so rigid, of course, that like I said, I was 8. I knew I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't know at the time I was going to be a comic book artist. But even then, I was like totally just like, I'm going to do art, and it wound up being like, well, actually, right out of college, I did a role-playing game, you know, and that kind of went nowhere, but it was a fun experience. And then I started doing graphic design for a company because it paid the bills and let me be like an adult. And then I went from that right into doing my own game company. So it's that thing where as long as I was doing art, I was kind of
pushing in the right direction
and enjoying what I was doing. And then if it got stagnant, that's when I would shift because it's like, nope, art is all about exploration. Art is all about learning what I can do and finding new things that I can do and exploring new ways about, you know, when I say things I feel about the world, it's not even meant to be deep. I mean, we made books about ninjas and I make fairy doors. These are not super deep things, but they are creative explorations in my existence on this plane.
Phenomenal. You know? And like I said, we all enjoyed it. Everybody on the panel who watched it, we were talking about it, and you know, the relation to, you know, your references to Thor and then eventually.
Did you guys actually get to see it?
Yeah.
Did they? I didn't. It's been a long time since I saw it. I saw it once when it came out, but I find it hard to listen or watch myself.
Okay.
I know what you mean.
Okay. But I made all these, like I was talking about the Norse gods in that one. And so I made all of these things. I made all the graphics for that myself. And so I made these what I call Hello Kitty versions of the Norse gods. I absolutely love them. If I could ever find a way to use them in a project in the future, I'm totally using them. Like I'll do all of the various pantheons that I knew, Egyptian and Greek.
I want to see those so bad.
It would be perfect on a fairy door, you know, with maybe the entrance to Asgard, or perhaps
so the Bifrost fairy door.
Yeah, perhaps the pyramids.
Yeah.
You know, you could just take every mythology and put something. You know, do like the Greeks by Mount Olympus or the Pantheon, if you wanted to.
And the one that I always love is every time you make a strong, and this is a true thing with art, every time you make a strong idea about what you're doing, I love when you make it and you put it out there and then someone interprets it in an entirely different way. Because the second you said you could make a pyramid, I was like, yes, I could make a pyramid. And people were like, I love this Zelda door.
Whoops.
I'm like, yes, you do.
Yes,
you do.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Well, actually, we made a Raven door, and specifically, it was kind of like Edgar Allan Poe. We made it around Halloween time. It's a cool raven that we just made that we could put on a fairy door. And the number of people come up to us and say, "Oh, it's a Woden door," and we're like, "Yes, it is."
That's it, exactly.
Betcha.
Got it, friend.
That's exactly. Oh, somebody sees a TARDIS. Oh, look, it's the Get Smart phone booth. Wait, no. Never mind.
Well, we actually learned about a band that for a while was my son's favorite band. You still like them, as far as I can tell.
What band is this?
But we were making steampunk animals. So
Okay.
we made steampunk bunnies, steampunk this, steampunk that, and we made a steampunk giraffe. And someone came by and went, "You're fans too?" And we were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, you got to check them out. And we did, and they're a really fun band, yes.
Steampunk Giraffe is a band name.
Giraffe?
Yes.
Wow.
Check
Okay.
out their cover of Diamonds.
Okay. Because
Yes.
we have a steampunk episode coming up soon that we're going to be recording,
Yes.
so I'm looking forward
check
to
out
anything.
their cover of Diamonds, I believe is
Okay.
the song. What was your favorite song by Steampunk Giraffe? Probably that one?
Probably that.
There's
Okay,
a,
so
there's a
Diamonds
bunch
by
of their
Steampunk
stuff. Very
Giraffe.
fun stuff.
Very cool. All right. Chris Pallace has been in the house with us today. Thank you very much, Chris, for your time, and we're looking forward to all sorts of creations.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. And especially because we found out through your love of tangents that you do fit in well with us. So we're going to go ahead and start wrapping things up. Are we playing our out cue?
Yes.
Is it happening? That's
Yes,
awesome.
it is.
And this has been Monkey Business, a product of the Mighty Monkey Corporation, purveyors and producers of the Flower City Comic-Con, coming at you June 9th and 10th of 2018 at the Floriano Rochester Riverside Convention Center. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Patreon now, FC3 ROC. And we're looking forward to hearing from you guys and seeing y'all next week. Thank you.